Hi there, my name's Luke. Welcome back to PhotoBite. Today we are out here in 28-degree heat checking out the Huawei P30 and the P30 Pro. Which one is best for you? Let's find out. So earlier this year, Huawei released the P30 and the P30 Pro, and the main focus point of these cameras is the camera rather than just the performance. They normally reside that one for the Mate series. However, with the P series, this is where they really push out the envelope when it comes to camera capabilities, and compared to the two of them, they're both good, but there are some very big differences between the two of them. The P30, you're looking at a 48 megapixel wide angle, 60 megapixel super wide angle, and an 8 megapixel telephoto. Now on this end, you're looking at a 40 megapixel wide angle, 16 megapixel ultra wide angle, and then you're looking at an 8 megapixel telephoto. And then when it comes to the front, they're both looking at 32 megapixel cameras. So keeping the same on the front, the selfies are good, they're crisp, they're clean, they're quite wide. If you're coming from an iPhone, they're going to be a lot wider than you would normally see, but again, still very, very good cameras and definitely worth considering when you're looking at this phone. So it sounds the same, but what makes them different? Well, the difference is that there's actually a fourth camera with the P30 Pro, and that's called the Time-of-Flight lens. And that is a 2 megapixel camera, not to be used with photos, but simply to create depth. So it'll measure the distance per se of the subject, and it will blur out whatever else is further away. A very clever trick using AI, and enables you to get a more effective bokeh effect rather than just using AI to cut the subject out, because as you can see, it can be hit and miss. As someone's doing that and there's a big gap here, sometimes it gets missed, but with the Time-of-Flight lens it actually does better. So if we just take my bag for example, it's not the most amazing subject, but when you go over to portrait, it doesn't detect any faces. You gotta go over to aperture mode, and you see it already crops in, and you can kind of see that it's using the TOF lens, or the Time-of-Flight lens. And if we just take a quick picture, we can see how it worked that out. So now if we have a look, it's still using stitching, but it's using the Time-of-Flight lens a bit more, so it's a bit smarter. But to really get an idea of how the TOF lens works, it actually bleeds the background blur. So if you look in the foreground, if you look here, you can see that that's still in focus. Still in focus about there, but then it bleeds it out. It doesn't just cut the subject out and then just blur everything else, because it doesn't look natural. This is designed to help the photos look more natural. So you've got a natural background fall off going into the blur, and then the subject remains pin sharp. Very clever and very simple and easy to use, but annoyingly you got to use it with the 2x zoom, and you also have to go into aperture mode, but again, not the end of the world. Now if we switch over to the P30, so if we just swipe down quickly, tap on screen recorder, now we're going to go over and to aperture mode. Again, it's gone into the 2x. Now we're just going to take a picture. Now we're going to review it. So again, it's done quite a good job. In fact, you would almost think it's not the same, but there's just a few different stitching issues, but other than that, you're still getting the bleed off, which is quite clever. And it does, again, it makes you question if the TOF lens is really worth it, because as you can see in the photos, it doesn't make a big difference, but it does make the smaller differences that you may notice in the photos. So if you're really much of a camera nerd and you can see those differences, you're going to pick it up when you're looking at the P30 and the P30 Pro. However, if you're very happy with the kind of photos you're getting right now, but you want something a bit more, you'll be happy going with the P30, and the P30 Pro is a good option as well if you like the zoom, but with the TOF lens included and what the P30 can do without one, it's hard to see why you would need the P30 Pro. Now, another difference between the P30 and the P30 Pro is the periscope zoom lens. So this is designed with lenses going that way, and the sensor is actually sitting like that. So as it's going through, it's actually coming up and poking out like a periscope. And this enables it to have more lenses, and it can also go further. So rather than stacking lenses this way, it stacks them that way. A very smart move, but as clever as it is, practically it isn't great, but we'll get to that in a moment. Now with the P30, it just uses lenses stacked like any other camera does, and quite frankly the sort of lenses you see on here are very similar to what you would see with the P20 Pro. Rather than having a black and white camera, you actually have a 60 megapixel ultra wide, which is much better. So if you're looking at a P20 Pro and you're kind of umming and ahhing, have a look at the P30. It's the next step up and it could save you a few pennies. So when it comes to the zoom features, going from 1x to 5x is a bit excessive. So for example, if I use the P30 because it does have 5x, if I tap on that, that's quite a big difference. Let's just go back to 1 again. 5x. There's no middle ground with the P30 Pro, which is that one down there, but this one is 3x, which is a nice in the middle option, still using the camera, using its full capabilities, but it's not going crazy. Whereas with the P30 Pro, because of the periscope, I mean, it's an incredible design, it's very innovative, it's nothing that we've seen before, but it's not completely practical. It's a great selling point. When it comes to zooming up on subjects way in the distance, it's fantastic for that, but there's very few times where you'll be wanting to use it and you'll be more likely visiting somewhere, you'll be focusing on a certain point, that's when you'd use it. But everyday photography, a 3x zoom would be much better. Just to give you an idea how you would use that, I'm just going to turn on the screen recording again. I'm going to tap on the camera. We're now going to go over to photo. So you have to hold down and then slide up, and then you're going to try and find the 3x zoom, which can be a bit annoying. But what it is doing is it's actually cropping into the sensor of the camera. So it's using that 40 megapixel sensor and cropping in on that, which is fine, it's okay, but it does mean you're not benefiting from a full sensor readout of what the photo is. It's cropping into the resolution, and that doesn't exactly please everyone who cares about the pixels. And one of the clear differences mainly is the fact that if you imagine a camera lens, you've got 24 and then you've got 70. The P30 Pro does 24, then 70, and the P30 will do the 50. Now, if you're someone who likes to shoot about 50mm, P30, if you are like someone that shoots at 70mm, then you're looking at the P30 Pro. So that's another little consideration to think about when you're looking at the two cameras. And again, one of the other selling features of the P30 Pro is when you go into more, you get a list of different options which you can see. So you've got slow-mo, panorama, monochrome, AR lens, light painting, but the one that we're interested in is right at the bottom in the middle, and it's dual view. So if I tap on that, what it gives you are two options. So you can actually see up close, and you can choose how up close you really want to be. So you can get really close. But then down at the bottom, you then have a wide angle, and this enables you to get two shots at the same time. So if we just go down to 2x, tap on the record button, so now it's actually recording two videos. It's recording the one on the top and it's recording the one on the bottom at the same time. You can't do that with the P30. Now, is this something you're going to use? Probably not. Can you think of a scenario where you could use it? Only a few. The chances of you needing a wide shot and a close-up is if you're studying something or if you're using it for research purposes, which isn't what you would use a phone for. Most likely you would get a camera out or two cameras out and you would set them up. Obviously the form factor of the phone is much better in case you do it on the fly, so that's really the only time you would use it. But for general practical reasons, I don't think there's going to be a major reason to use this sort of feature. And we hope this has really helped you decide which is a better model for you. Obviously there's more brands on the market, but between Huawei, these are the two phones that are great for photos. In terms of video, they're almost exactly the same. You do get a bit more with the P30 Pro. With the P30 Pro, you're gaining 4K up to 60 frames a second, whereas with this one it's only 30 frames a second. In 1080p, they both go up to 60 frames a second, that's standard. Slow-mo, you can do 720 at 960, and then you can do 120 at 1080. So the slow-mo is exactly the same. It's just a few differences in the video. Again, are you going to be using 4K at 60 frames a second? Maybe. Would you be using it on to upload? Maybe. It is a big file size, so do bear that in mind. You can easily get away with 1080p, and at that point you're back to the P30. Or you could just shoot 4K at 30 frames a second. Both of them can do it. So it really does weigh up which models you like. And in terms of video, they're not bad. They're very good, they're very clean, very crisp. But do bear in mind with phones, they love to do sharpening, they love to do saturation, and it's very hard to get away from that. So that's just what we've got to bear in mind. We hope this review has helped you decide between the P30 and the P30 Pro. If you guys have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, my name is Luke, this is Showdown, and we'll see you next time.